In the bustling city of Manchester, a young lawyer named Emma Wilson walked towards the old courthouse, her heart beating with a mixture of hope and nervousness. The morning was crisp, and a light fog hung in the air, casting a mysterious atmosphere around the historic building. Emma's worn leather briefcase swung gently at her side, carrying not just legal documents but her entire life's dream. She came from a small working-class neighborhood where most people struggled to make ends meet. Her parents had worked multiple jobs, her father at a local factory and her mother as a cleaner. They had always believed in her, even when money was tight and opportunities seemed rare. Emma remembered the countless nights she'd studied by candlelight, her textbooks spread out on the kitchen table, while her younger siblings slept nearby. The courthouse loomed before her, its stone walls telling stories of countless legal battles, fought over the years. Emma took a deep breath, remembering how hard she had worked to get here. Her law degree wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a testament to years of sacrifice, late-night study sessions, and part-time jobs that had kept her going. As she entered the building, the security guard gave her a quick nod. She was becoming a familiar face, though she was still one of the youngest lawyers in the building. Her tailored but slightly worn blazer and practical shoes told a story of someone who had worked hard for every opportunity. The courtroom was intimidating. Wooden benches, high ceilings, and the imposing judge's bench created an atmosphere of authority and tradition. Judge Richard Thompson sat above everyone else, his sharp eyes scanning the room. He was known for his strict demeanor and no-nonsense approach to law. Emma could feel the weight of expectations. The other lawyers in the room, mostly older men in expensive suits, looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and slight condescension. She was used to these looks. As a young woman from a working-class background, she had to work twice as hard to prove herself. Her current case was complex, a property dispute that seemed simple on the surface but had layers of legal complexity underneath. She had spent weeks preparing, researching every possible angle, checking and double-checking her arguments. This wasn't just another case for her. It was a chance to prove that she belonged in this world of law and justice. Emma thought about her journey. Growing up, she had seen how people without money or connections often struggled to get fair treatment. Her mother had once been unfairly dismissed from a cleaning job, and her family had no resources to fight back. That moment had planted a seed in Emma's heart, a desire to use the law as a tool for justice. As she prepared her documents, her hands trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the excitement of the moment. She knew she was about to challenge a system that had long favored the wealthy and powerful. Her research was thorough, her arguments carefully constructed. The courtroom began to fill up. Lawyers shuffled papers, whispered to each other, and cast occasional glances at Emma. She remained focused, reviewing her notes one last time. Her preparation was her armor, her knowledge her weapon. Judge Thompson adjusted his glasses, looking down from his elevated position. Emma could feel his initial skepticism. She was young, she was a woman, and she came from a background very different from the traditional legal professionals in this room. But Emma was ready. Her journey had prepared her for this moment. Every late night of studying, every part-time job she had worked, every sacrifice her family had made, they all led to this moment. She wasn't just representing herself, but every person who had been told they weren't good enough, who had been overlooked, who had been pushed to the margins. As the court session was about to begin, Emma took one more deep breath. The weight of her dreams, her family's hopes, and her own determination filled her heart. This was more than just a legal battle. This was her moment to show the world what she was capable of. The room fell silent. Judge Thompson looked down. Emma stood up, her voice steady, her spirit unbreakable. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Emma began presenting her case. The property dispute seemed simple on the surface, but she knew the details were far more complicated. Across from her sat Marcus Reynolds, a wealthy businessman with a reputation for buying and selling properties without concern for the people living in them. Marcus's legal team looked impressive. 3 lawyers in perfectly pressed suits sat at the table, their leather briefcases gleaming and expensive watches catching the light. They seemed confident, almost bored, as if this case was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Emma's opponent represented a development company that wanted to purchase a row of small houses in a working-class neighborhood. The residents had lived there for generations, but the company saw only potential profit. Each house represented a memory, a lifetime of stories, but to Marcus they were just numbers on a spreadsheet. She began her argument carefully, her voice clear and measured. Her research had uncovered something significant, a series of legal inconsistencies in how the company had been approaching property acquisitions. Each word was calculated, each sentence a carefully placed piece of a larger puzzle. The first lawyer from Marcus's team tried to interrupt, but Judge Thompson raised a hand, signaling him to be quiet. Something in Emma's presentation had caught the judge's attention. Her confidence was growing with every moment, replacing her earlier nervousness. Emma explained how the proposed development would displace dozens of families. She had personal stories, interviews with residents who would lose their homes. There was Mrs. Thompson, an elderly widow who had lived in her house for over 50 years. There was the Rodriguez family, who had raised 3 generations in their small but loved home. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His lawyers exchanged worried glances. Emma was no longer the young, inexperienced lawyer they had expected. She was methodical, passionate, and prepared. She presented documents that showed how the company had manipulated property valuations in previous developments. Old survey reports, hidden clauses, subtle legal tricks. She had uncovered everything. Her research was impeccable, her argument building like a carefully constructed building. The courtroom felt different now. The initial dismissive atmosphere had changed. Other lawyers were leaning forward, listening intently. Even the court reporters were paying close attention, their fingers flying across their stenography machines. Emma spoke about community value, something that couldn't be measured in simple monetary terms. She talked about the human cost of development, the emotional connections people have to their homes. Her words were not just legal arguments, but a passionate plea for human dignity. Marcus's lead lawyer tried to challenge her, presenting complex legal arguments. But Emma was prepared. She countered each point with precision, her knowledge of property law proving to be deeper and more nuanced than anyone had expected. Judge Thompson watched carefully. His initial skepticism was transforming into something else, a growing respect for the young lawyer who stood before him. He had seen many lawyers in his time, but few with such genuine passion and thorough preparation. The case was about more than just property. It was about justice, about protecting people who didn't have the resources to protect themselves. Emma represented something bigger than just a legal argument. She represented hope for those who often felt voiceless. As she continued her presentation, Emma thought about her own family. She remembered the struggles they had faced, the times when they could have lost everything. This case was personal to her in a way that went beyond legal technicalities. The courtroom was silent now, except for Emma's voice. Even Marcus looked uncomfortable, realizing that this would not be the easy victory he had anticipated. His lawyers were frantically writing notes, trying to find ways to counter her arguments. Emma's final point was her strongest. She demonstrated how the proposed development violated several community protection laws that were designed to prevent exactly this kind of aggressive property acquisition. Her evidence was clear, her argument irrefutable. As she concluded her presentation, there was a moment of complete silence. Then, almost imperceptibly, Judge Thompson nodded. Something significant had just happened in this courtroom, and everyone could feel it. Emma stood tall, her hands no longer trembling. She had done more than just present a case. She had shown that passion, preparation, and genuine commitment could challenge even the most powerful opponents. The challenge was not over, but she had made her mark. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath as Emma continued her argument. Breaking barriers was more than just a legal strategy for her. It was a personal mission. She knew that every word she spoke challenged the traditional system that had long favored the wealthy and powerful. Her argument began to expose deeper issues within property law. She revealed a pattern of systematic discrimination that went far beyond this single case. Each document she presented told a story of how small communities had been consistently overlooked and pushed aside by large development companies. Marcus Reynolds looked increasingly uncomfortable. His expensive suit suddenly seemed less impressive, his confident demeanor cracking under the weight of Emma's evidence. The other lawyers in the room shifted in their seats, recognizing something extraordinary was happening. Emma spoke about her own background, growing up in a neighborhood just like the one threatened by this development. She described how community meant more than just physical buildings. It was about connections, memories, and human dignity. Her words painted a picture of families who had built their lives in these homes, generations intertwined with the very walls around them. Judge Thompson leaned forward, his initial skepticism transforming into genuine interest. He had seen many lawyers in his years on the bench, but few who approached a case with such depth of understanding and genuine passion. The legal documents Emma presented were more than just papers. They were a narrative of systemic inequality. She traced how development companies had historically targeted working-class neighborhoods, pushing out long-time residents for quick profits. Her research was meticulous, her arguments backed by years of documented evidence. Marcus's lead lawyer tried multiple times to interrupt, but Emma remained calm. She understood that breaking barriers meant staying composed, even when challenged. Each interruption was met with a clear, well-researched response that left the opposing team struggling to find a counter-argument. She highlighted specific cases where similar developments had destroyed community structures. Old photographs, community records, and personal testimonies became part of her argument. Emma wasn't just presenting a legal case, she was telling a human story of resilience and community strength. The courtroom felt electric. Young lawyers in the back of the room watched her with growing admiration. Here was someone who was truly changing the narrative, challenging the existing legal framework with intelligence and compassion. Emma's argument began to reveal the true cost of unchecked development. It wasn't just about property values or legal technicalities. It was about human lives, about the invisible threads that connect people to their homes and communities. She spoke about Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow who had raised her children in the house, now threatened by development. She talked about the Rodriguez family, who had celebrated countless birthdays and mourned family losses within those walls. These were not just stories, they were lives at stake. The legal documents became more than just paper. They were a weapon against injustice, a tool to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Emma's voice grew stronger with each piece of evidence, each legal precedent she cited. Marcus Reynolds began to look defeated. His team of expensive lawyers seemed to shrink in their seats. They had expected an easy victory, a simple transaction that would add to their company's profits. Instead, they were facing a formidable opponent who had dismantled their entire approach. Judge Thompson's expression changed. What had started as a routine property dispute was now revealing deeper issues of social justice. Emma was doing more than just representing her clients. She was challenging an entire system of legal and economic inequality. The barriers she was breaking were not just legal, they were social, economic, and deeply personal. Each word was a hammer chipping away at the walls of privilege and indifference. As she continued, Emma thought about her parents. She thought about every person who had been told they weren't good enough, who had been pushed to the margins of society. This was more than a legal battle. This was a fight for recognition, for dignity, for justice. The courtroom was completely silent now. Even the court reporters had stopped typing, captivated by Emma's presentation. She had transformed a simple property dispute into a powerful statement about community, justice, and human rights. Marcus's team looked defeated. Their expensive suits and confident demeanor had been stripped away, revealing the fragility of their position. Emma had not just presented a case, she had told a story of hope, of resistance, of the power of standing up for what is right. As she concluded her argument, there was a sense that something significant had changed. The barriers were not just breaking, they were crumbling. The moment Emma shared her personal story, the entire courtroom changed. Her voice became softer, more vulnerable, yet incredibly powerful. She began by talking about her childhood in a small working-class neighborhood where every family struggled but remained connected through hope and mutual support. Her father had worked in a local factory for 30 years, coming home with calloused hands and tired eyes. Her mother cleaned houses, often working double shifts to ensure Emma could have books and a chance at education. They had taught her that true success wasn't about money, but about making a difference. Judge Thompson listened intently. Something in Emma's narrative touched something deep within him. He saw beyond the legal arguments, seeing the human story behind the case. His own background, growing up in a similar working-class family, began to resonate with her words. Marcus Reynolds shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His expensive suit and confident demeanor started to crack. The story wasn't just about property anymore, it was about human dignity, about the real meaning of community. Emma described how her parents had saved every penny, how they had believed in education as the only way out of poverty. She talked about studying by candlelight, working part-time jobs, and fighting against a system that often seemed designed to keep people like her down. Her vulnerability became her greatest strength. She wasn't just presenting a legal case. She was sharing a lived experience. The courtroom, once cold and formal, now felt warm and personal. Even the senior lawyers were leaning forward, captivated by her story. She spoke about the neighborhood, threatened by development, how it reminded her of her own childhood community. Each house represented more than just a building. They were repositories of memories, of family histories, of human connections that couldn't be measured in monetary value. The turning point came when Emma pulled out a photograph. It was a picture of her family standing in front of their small house taken when she was a child. Her parents looked tired but proud, surrounded by their children. This single image said more than hours of legal argument. Marcus's lead lawyer tried to interrupt, but Judge Thompson silenced him with a look. The entire courtroom was now focused on Emma, her story breaking through the traditional legal barriers. She explained how development companies often saw communities as mere numbers on a spreadsheet. But communities were living, breathing entities. They were networks of relationships, support systems that kept people alive and hopeful. Emma's voice began to crack slightly as she talked about Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow who would lose her home. She described how this house held decades of memories, first steps, family celebrations, moments of grief and joy. These were not just walls and a roof, but the very fabric of human experience. The wealthy businessman, Marcus Reynolds, looked smaller now. His ambitious development plan seemed cruel and heartless in the face of Emma's passionate explanation. The other lawyers in the room exchanged meaningful glances. Judge Thompson's expression had completely transformed. The initial skepticism was gone, replaced by a look of understanding and respect. He saw in Emma not just a young lawyer, but a powerful advocate for justice. Emma's final point was her most powerful. She wasn't just fighting against a development project. She was fighting for the right of communities to exist, to maintain their identity, to have a voice in their own future. The courtroom felt different now. The cold, formal atmosphere had been replaced by something more human, more compassionate. Emma had done more than present a legal argument. She had told a story of hope, of resilience, of the human spirit's ability to overcome challenges. Marcus's team looked defeated. Their expensive suits and confident demeanor seemed meaningless against the power of Emma's narrative. They had expected a simple legal battle, but they had encountered something much more profound. As Emma concluded her personal story, there was a moment of complete silence. Then, almost imperceptibly, Judge Thompson nodded. Something significant had happened in this courtroom, a turning point that went far beyond a simple property dispute. Emma stood tall, her hands no longer trembling. She had transformed a legal case into a powerful statement about human dignity, about the value of community, about the power of standing up for what is right. The turning point had come, and nothing would be the same again. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Thompson began to deliver his verdict. Emma stood quietly, her heart racing but her exterior calm. The past hours of intense legal battle had led to this moment, a moment that would change everything. After careful consideration, the judge began, his voice steady and clear. The court finds in favor of the community residents. Those simple words carried the weight of months of struggle, years of hope, and generations of unheard voices. Marcus. Reynolds looked stunned. His team of expensive lawyers sat motionless, their carefully prepared arguments crumbling like a house of cards. Emma had done more than win a case. She had challenged an entire system of corporate power. The judge continued, explaining how the development project violated multiple community protection laws. He praised Emma's thorough research and passionate presentation, highlighting her commitment to justice. His words transformed the courtroom from a place of legal procedure to a platform of social change. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd of community members had gathered. When the news spread, cheers erupted. Mrs. Thompson, the elderly widow whose home was at the center of the dispute, wept with joy. The Rodriguez family hugged each other, their hope restored. Emma felt a mix of emotions, relief, pride, and a deep sense of responsibility. This wasn't just a personal victory. It was a victory for every community that had been overlooked, every family that had been told they didn't matter. As she stepped outside, the sunlight felt different. Journalists surrounded her, asking questions about her remarkable victory. But Emma remained humble. She spoke about the community, about the importance of standing up for what is right, about the power of collective hope. Her parents were waiting. Nearby, her father, with his weathered hands and proud smile, hugged her tightly. Her mother's eyes were filled with tears of joy. They had sacrificed everything to give Emma this opportunity, and she had not just succeeded, she had made a difference. The legal victory meant more than just saving a few houses. It set a precedent. Other development companies would think twice before pushing out long-standing communities. Emma had shown that the law could be a tool for justice, not just a weapon for the powerful. Marcus Reynolds approached her after the hearing. His demeanor had changed completely. "You've taught me something today," he said quietly. "Business isn't just about profit, it's about people." Emma nodded, accepting his acknowledgement with grace. Word of her victory spread quickly. Young lawyers, especially women from working-class backgrounds, saw her as a beacon of hope. She had shown that passion, preparation, and integrity could overcome seemingly impossible barriers. The local university invited her to speak about her experience. Law students packed the auditorium, eager to hear how she had challenged the system. Emma spoke about the importance of seeing law as a tool for social change, of understanding that every legal case is fundamentally about human lives. Judge Thompson's support was crucial. In his final remarks, he commended Emma's approach, noting that the legal system should protect the most vulnerable members of society. His words carried weight, potentially influencing future legal decisions. The community celebrated. A small street party was organized, with residents thanking Emma for her incredible work. Children looked at her with admiration, seeing a living example of how education and determination could create real change. Emma knew this was just the beginning. The victory was important, but the real work of creating systemic change was ongoing. She thought about future cases, about the many communities that still needed a voice. Her law firm, initially skeptical of her approach, now celebrated her as a hero. Senior partners who had once ignored her now sought her advice. Her approach to law, combining deep research with genuine human compassion, was becoming a model for young lawyers. As the day ended, Emma reflected on her journey. From studying by candlelight to standing in a courtroom and changing lives, her path had been anything but easy. But every challenge, every late night of study, had led to this moment. The triumph was not just hers. It belonged to her parents, who believed in her, to the community she represented, to every person who had ever been told they weren't good enough. Her spirit had triumphed, and in that triumph, she had given hope to countless others.